purpose of Worth the War is preparing people for healthy love and relationships and how to avoid abuse. If you think we can do a better job than we're doing today with love and relationship, then you found the exact right channel. We're rethinking our approach to love so that we can spare hearts and help people have healthier relationships. Today's topic should be really practical and hopefully extremely helpful to you. What we're going to look at is how the coronavirus is affecting our social relationships and how we're planning and making good choices for really re-entering into a quote-unquote normal social environment. It's just like getting on an on-ramp of a freeway. We can't go from 0 to 60 without expecting some pretty shocking changes. So we don't have to do that, and we're going to look at some healthier ways to really re-enter into the environment that we're headed into, because it's probably not going to be just like it was when we left. The things that I thought were really interesting, and I'll cite them down below, where there were some surveys where people self-reported what was happening in their relationships during this time of global quarantine. And somewhere in the mid-20s was the world average. Some countries came in low, like 9s or 10s, others came in the 50s, saying that their familial and friendship relationships had been adversely strained or even broken during this time of coronavirus and quarantine. One of the even more troubling statistics was the self-reporting of how their mental health had been adversely affected. For instance, in the UK, it was self-reported that 65% of people felt that they had been negatively affected in their mental health during this time of quarantine. Not all countries were that high, but I'll go ahead and cite that down below so that you can see it as well. People went through major paradigm shifts. There was a whole lot more people who were struggling with their worldview, what their religion was, as they were pulling back from their faith communities, really wondering, do I believe what I'm doing? All of these things add together to creating an environment that we probably need to think about before we just jump right back into whatever looks normal to us. One additional statistic that I thought was kind of mind-blowing was that between January and June of 2019, there were 11% of people who were reporting depressive or anxiety issues. If you take the number in January of 2020, it was 41%. So when we really step back, we realize this has not been a small shift in the way people have begun to notice themselves. And that's not all bad. There is truth to the fact that when we back up and we kind of quiet the rest of the world, we are really confronted with what's going on within ourselves. There can be bonuses to that. We might actually be able to leverage that to create a healthier future for ourselves. Let's look at some things we can do to re-enter into the social environment, maybe even better, not worse for wear, but better for wear. The first thing we can do as we sit and we look at our blank calendar and we look forward to a season of remixing with the people that we have made commitments and relationships and connections to. The first thing that we can do is we can realize that there is power in our voice. We can share what we're concerned about with the people that we trust. It's very important to find a safe place that we can talk about. I'm really concerned about these relationships, or I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of being in large groups again. That's just been so long for me. Different people respond to these things differently, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being able to articulate that and share that so that you can actually, number one, use your voice, which gives you a sense of power to be able to know what you feel. Number two, be able to find that safe place in someone where they can help you work through things. And number three, maybe even create a plan for yourself that says, if I start to feel anxiety as I enter out into these situations, it is okay for me to back out of them. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that's the first thing. Remember that your voice is powerful. Use it to yourself, use it to a person that you can trust, and begin to make plans for how you plan on entering back into the normal world. The second one may sound a little cliche, but try not to let it fall on your ears that way. Self-care isn't just external pampering. It's so much deeper than that. COVID has actually given us time to figure out what our peaceful baseline is. We may never have even known what that was before. And I'm gonna just raise my hand and say, I don't think I fully understood what my body felt like at peace, okay? So when we think about that, self-care is preserving and doing things so that we can recognize when we're at peace, we can feed that peace so that we know when we're off kilter, and that is a really important piece of information. So it isn't just about pampering. Self-care is about taking time to make sure you get your rest, that you're hydrated, that you get nutritious food, not just food that fills you. It's also being really careful with things like alcohol or any kind of recreational drug, because they can also give you a sense of artificial peace that you seek that will really not feed the kind of level that you're looking for. When we think about keeping active and doing these things, sometimes we just blow right past them like they aren't really doing much, but the truth is they are the protectors for your level of peace, your ability to function in a way that doesn't hurt you, and most of all, helps to feed your connections in a way that you can actually set boundaries, hold people accountable, live a healthy life with other people. That's something that we may not have spent as much time on pre-COVID, but now, if we know what peace feels like, we have something that we need to protect even as we start to fill our day planners up with lots of wonderful things. And I tend to think this third aspect is actually the most important of all. It's getting ourselves mentally prepared. Some things have changed. People have spent a year or more just with a small group. They are used to expressing in that group whatever they feel comfortable expressing or whatever that culture deemed appropriate. They are not used to being tested or prodded or having a lot of other things thrown at them. And that is true of all of us. And there have been in many countries of the world major political shifts, lots of arguing. Like I said before, people have really gone through some dips and changes in the way they look at their worldview. People are changing, and when that happens, relationships have to shift. We have to leave room, hold space for us to go through that. We also need to hold space for other people to go through that, and we need to be prepared for it. If we find ourselves in a situation where we're just plain uncomfortable, something's coming up that we haven't dealt with in a long time, we notice some shifts in people, we don't fit into certain spaces that we might have before, we need to be prepared so that we can give ourselves space to adjust. That may mean pulling out of a conversation politely, it may mean setting boundaries and saying, I don't want to discuss that at this point, maybe down the road, but today I don't want to. It's really important to be able to set boundaries for ourselves and draw lines in the sand that say, if these kinds of things come up and I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to back out of that and I'm going to give myself permission to do that, and I'm really not going to worry about whether or not it's received the way I want it to be. So these kinds of things may seem very small, but they can make huge adjustments in our comfort level as we enter out into a world that isn't going to look exactly like we left it. I hope you can see how it all kind of starts to come together. Yes, we had stress during quarantine, no doubt about it. We had struggles, but we also got the opportunity to back out of a world that was spinning without us, and it all slowed down. And now we get the permission and the power that we maybe didn't even have before to know what it is that we want, what relationships we want to keep and to work on, which ones we may want to call and get rid of. And we also get to step back and realize what our level is so that when we start to tip, we start to tilt, get uncomfortable, feel like we've offended someone, maybe we've been offended, we can back up and give ourselves space and time to readjust to a more rigorous connection with other people. It is exciting to think about that the world is opening up again. And maybe, just maybe, we learned things that can not only move us further in our lives, but more mentally healthfully. I hope that in some way this will give you some of the permission that you need and some of the equipment that you need to really re-enter in a healthier way. It means so much to think that you took the time to be here. There's so many other channels that have so many great things to talk about, and it really means a lot that you were here. I hope that you will consider subscribing to our community as we are rethinking love and relationship, and we are bent on sparing hearts in the process, helping people live healthier and more robust relationships in their lives. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I hope you have a great rest of your week.